Last time, we walked through the inner world of Mount Carmel, how David Koresh built an empire of belief on the edge of Waco, Texas. We explored how scripture, surveillance, and psychological control created an obedient community sealed off from the outside world. We traced the roots of his apocalyptic theology, his manipulation of families, and the mind control techniques that made him not just a prophet, but a messiah to his followers. But in the early morning hours of February 28, 1993, that world collided with another. Federal agents, weapons drawn, helicopters overhead, news crews standing by. This is the story of how the siege began. I'm Rick Welch, and this is Prophet of Fire. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, ATF, had spent months preparing for what they called Operation Showtime. The mission: serve search and arrest warrants on David Koresh and seize illegal weapons reportedly stored inside the compound. The plan was built on secrecy and speed, but the secrecy didn't hold. A local TV news crew trying to get to Mount Carmel ahead of the raid got lost and asked for directions from a U.S. Postal Service driver who also happened to be David Koresh's brother-in-law. Word reached Koresh minutes before the agents arrived. According to survivors, Koresh gathered his followers and prayed. Some armed themselves, others huddled with children. By 9:45 a.m., 2 cattle trailers full of heavily armed ATF agents rolled up the long driveway. Inside were elite special response teams from the Dallas and New Orleans field offices. Then came the first shot. To this day, no one can say with certainty who fired it. What followed was a chaotic 2-hour gun battle. Windows shattered, walls splintered. Dozens of agents and Davidians exchanged fire. Over 900 rounds were fired in the first 20 minutes alone. By the end of that morning, 4 ATF agents were dead. Their names: Special Agent Conway LeBleu, age 30. Special Agent Todd McKeon, age 28. Special Agent Robert J. Williams, age 26. Special Agent Stephen Willis, age 32. All 4 were shot while attempting to breach the compound's second-story windows and front door. They died in service to a mission that would change American law enforcement forever. Inside the compound, the losses were just as real, though rarely mentioned in the headlines. 6 Branch Davidians were killed that day: Peter Gent, Perry Jones, Koresh's father-in-law, Winston Blake, Wayne Martin, a Harvard-trained lawyer and close associate of Koresh, Jimmy Riddle, and J. Dean Wendell. And David Koresh himself? Shot twice, once in the wrist and once in the side. Survivor David Thibodeau remembers, quote, "I heard Perry scream. He was hit bad. David was bleeding, but still giving orders. The shooting didn't stop for what felt like forever." End quote. ATF agents pulled back, bloodied and shaken. They hadn't brought enough food, water, or medical supplies for a siege. They had expected arrests, not resistance. Inside Mount Carmel, Koresh declared that prophecy was being fulfilled. He told his followers they were under attack from Babylon, that the 5th seal of Revelation had been opened, that the end had begun. Phones inside the compound still worked. Koresh called 911, speaking with McLennan County Sheriff Lieutenant Larry Lynch. Quote, "There are women and children in here, and you're letting them shoot at us. This is not necessary." End quote. But it was already too late. The bullets had flown, the casualties were real, and the eyes of the world were now watching Waco, Texas. In the aftermath of the firefight, chaos gave way to confusion. The ATF pulled back and called in the FBI. Within 24 hours, the small gravel road leading to Mount Carmel was transformed into a full-blown federal command post. News helicopters circled overhead. Journalists from CNN, ABC, the Dallas Morning News, all crammed in behind yellow barricades. Satellite vans lined the roads. The siege had officially begun. Sheila Martin, a Branch Davidian survivor, says, quote, "We were watching the TV from inside. We saw ourselves on the news. David said, 'This is it. God's about to make us known to the world.'" End quote. Back inside the compound, Koresh was wounded but very much in control. Despite his injuries, he held multiple meetings a day with his followers, preaching, quoting scripture, and shaping what they believed was happening. According to his theology, the book of Revelation was unfolding in real time. The U.S. government was Babylon. The attack was foretold, and now the group was being tested before the final judgment. In archival audio, we hear Koresh say, quote, "God has brought this about. You see, they've come to destroy us, but the Lamb shall not be overcome." End quote. Meanwhile, the FBI brought in their hostage rescue team and trained negotiators. At first, both sides spoke. There were phone lines still working between Koresh, and federal agents. Lead FBI negotiator Brian Sage recalled, quote, "He was calm, charismatic, engaging, even when wounded, but every conversation returned to Scripture. Every negotiation had to go through his theology." End quote. Koresh promised to come out if the world would hear his message. He agreed to record an audio sermon and said he'd surrender after it aired nationally. Surprisingly, the FBI let it happen. On March 2nd, his message was broadcast on Christian radio nationwide. In it, Koresh called himself the Lamb, declared judgment near, and referenced the 7 seals. Then, silence. He didn't come out. The FBI was furious. Negotiators felt duped, but inside Mount Carmel, Koresh's prophecy had gained even more momentum. To his followers, the delay wasn't deception, it was divine timing. Survivor David Thibodeau remembers, quote, "He told us, 'God says not yet,' and we believed him. We thought the FBI would eventually see the truth and back off." End quote. Over the next few days, the compound was plunged into psychological warfare. The FBI cut off power. They blasted recordings, rabbits being slaughtered, loud music, even Nancy Sinatra's "These Boots Are Made for Walkin'" over giant speakers through the night. They pointed bright floodlights at the windows. Tanks rolled closer by the day. But the Davidians didn't break. The more pressure the FBI applied, the more Koresh reframed their suffering as proof of their righteousness. He told them it was all part of the prophecy, that God was using Babylon to purify the saints. What the FBI saw as tactical pressure, Koresh turned into theological fuel. The standoff would last another 44 days. As the standoff stretched into its second week, life inside Mount Carmel was tense, silent, and terrifying. Over 80 Branch Davidians remained inside. Among them, 46 were children. Many of the kids were born in the compound. Others had been brought by parents who joined Koresh's teaching from California, Hawaii, New York, even Australia. They lived without electricity or running water. Food was dwindling, so was medicine. Some of the children were sick, others injured in the initial firefight, and yet no one left. No parents walked out. Survivor Sheila Martin remembers, quote, "He told us that if we left, we'd be destroyed, that we were chosen, that the children were God's army. We believed it." End quote. Koresh taught that the children in Mount Carmel would play a sacred role in the last days. He referred to them as the pure ones, untainted by the world, vessels for the future kingdom. Letting them leave, he said, would be like sacrificing them to Satan. And so the parents stayed, not because they weren't scared, but because they believed that obedience was salvation. David Thibodeau later said, quote, "There were mothers who cried every night, but they also thought they were doing the right thing. David convinced them that this was their trial." End quote. One of the few glimpses into life inside came from videos recorded by Koresh's followers and released to the media. In one, children smiled awkwardly at the camera, others sang hymns. Koresh, bandaged and pale, introduced his wives and infants like royalty. Quote, "This is God's house. These are God's children, and I am the messenger." End quote. To the public, the footage was disturbing, but to the followers inside, it was proof that the world didn't understand. They saw themselves as the faithful remnant. Everyone else, agents of judgment. Still, the strain began to show. Food was rationed. Toilet facilities were overflowing. Tensions grew, especially among the few men still permitted to carry weapons. And behind closed doors, Koresh remained the voice of prophecy and control. Former member Dana Okamoto stated, quote, "I remember him saying, 'Even if the whole world comes against us, we will not bow.' That kind of talk, it kept people there. It made fear feel holy." End quote. The FBI, meanwhile, was growing impatient. They had started letting some children leave, 21 in total over the course of 10 days. But with every small release, they expected more. Instead, the doors slammed shut. Koresh claimed he was receiving new revelations. He told the FBI he would come out once he completed his written interpretation of the 7 seals. It became clear Koresh wasn't stalling. He was stalling for God, and the FBI was running out of time and options. By early April, the standoff had dragged on for more than 5 weeks. Over 900 federal agents surrounded the compound. Military equipment rolled in. Negotiators worked in shifts, talking to Koresh for hours each day, but there was no movement. Koresh had made a promise. He would come out once he finished writing his manuscript on the 7 seals, but the FBI didn't believe him anymore. They saw the talks as games, stalls, manipulations. They were under pressure from Washington, from the media, from the memory of 4 dead agents. And inside the FBI's tactical units, the call for action was growing louder. The FBI tried escalating pressure again. They intensified psychological tactics, more floodlights, music, and more recordings of screaming rabbits, but still no surrender. Survivor Sheila Martin remembers, quote, "We were exhausted, but David said we had to endure, that suffering meant we were near the end," end quote. Every day that passed, Koresh's theology deepened. He preached to the group that they were now entering the 6th seal. When the sun would darken, the moon would turn to blood, and the heavens would roll back like a scroll. They weren't just followers anymore. They were martyrs in waiting. The children who had been released earlier had told child psychologists what life inside was like. They spoke of beatings, of food rationing, of spiritual wives and God's army. FBI behavioral analysts warned that Koresh was showing signs of a classic doomsday prophet, one who wouldn't surrender because surrender would invalidate his message. FBI negotiator Brian Sage remembers, quote, "We were starting to believe that if we didn't take decisive action, those people weren't going to come out at all," end quote. On April 17th, Koresh sent word through his attorneys that he was ready. He would complete his manuscript. He just needed more time. The FBI waited, then grew tired of waiting. On April 18th, the decision was made. Attorney General Janet Reno approved a plan to end the siege. It was simple: inject tear gas into the building and force the Branch Davidians to come out without a firefight. But as history shows, nothing in Waco was ever simple. On the morning of April 19, 1993 at 6 a.m., tanks began ramming holes into the compound's walls. CS gas was pumped inside. Koresh's voice came over the radio. Quote, "We want the press. This is America. You have no right to do this. You're breaking the law," end quote. For hours, the gas flowed, but no one came out. Around noon, smoke was seen rising from inside the compound, then fire, then collapse. The final judgment, whether divine or human, had come. In our next episode, we will examine the gripping, minute-by-minute account of April 19, 1993, from the moment the FBI launched their tear gas operation to the tragic inferno that claimed 76 lives. We will comb through real-time FBI tactical actions, audio and transcript excerpts from negotiators and Koresh, eyewitness accounts from survivors, when and how the fire started, and the final moments inside Mount Carmel. I'm Rick Welch, and this is Prophet of Fire.